Hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Avila reporting from Dallas County, and who's here? Who am I here with?
Hi, it's Hanyu.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Doing the same thing, different day. Life.
Life, I getcha. So, do you know what we're talking about today?
To be honest, I can't remember off the top of my head what we are going on about.
Oh, we're talking about the Vela Incident.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, the Vela Incident was an unidentified double flash of light detected by an American Vela hotel satellite on September 22nd, 1979, near the Prince Edward Islands in the Indian Ocean. So, that's very mysterious.
It is very mysterious.
Yeah. So, you want ready to get into it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the double flash was detected on September 22nd, 1979 at about 12:53 a.m. by the American Vela satellite OPS 6911, which carried various sensors designed to detect nuclear explosions that contraved the partial nuclear test ban treaty. In addition to being able to detect gamma rays, X-rays, and neutrons. Now, the satellite also contained two silicon solid-state bangmeter sensors that would detect the dual light flashes associated with the atmospheric nuclear explosion. The initial belief, intense flash, or the initial brief, intense flash followed by a second longer flash. So that's what that's going on. So wait, how do you pronounce nuclear?
Nuclear?
You pronounce it nuclear?
I guess so, yeah.
I think it's supposed to be pronounced nuclear.
Hmm. I feel like that's more of a potato.
It might be nuclear or nuclear. So the satellite reported a double flash, which could be characteristic of an atmospheric nuclear explosion of 2 to 3 kilotons, which is a lot. So, in the Indian Ocean between the Crozet Islands, which is a sparsely inhabited French possession, and the Prince Edward Islands, which belong to South Africa. Now, acoustic data of the sound surveillance system established by the United States to detect Soviet submarines and the missile impact locating system designed to detect missile nose cone impact locations of test missiles in the Atlantic and Pacific test ranges were searched in an effort to gain more knowledge on the possibility of nuclear detonation in the region. So yeah, there's that going on in the region. So these data were found not to have enough substantial evidence of detonation of a nuclear weapon. However, a detailed alarm affirming study regarding the Mills data correlating with the time and location of the Vela flash was not considered in that finding. Now,
Hmm.
the United States Air Force surveillance aircraft flew 25 stories over that area of the Indian Ocean from September 22nd to October 29th, 1979, to carry out atmospheric sampling. Now, studies of wind patterns confirmed that fallout from an explosion in the southern Indian Ocean could have been carried from there to southwestern Australia. Now, it was reported that low levels of iodine 131, which is a short half-life product of nuclear fission, were detected in sheep in the southeastern Australian states of Victoria and Tasmania soon after the event. Now, sheep in New Zealand showed no such trace, so they were good. Now, the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico detected an anomalous ionospheric wave during the morning of September 22nd, 1979, which moved from the southeast toward the northwest, an event that had not been observed previously. So, what do you think about all that?
Seems very interesting. interesting.
Yeah. Where do you think this thing came from? Where do you think this explosion came from?
I mean, the explosion could come from anywhere. So, the idea is there enough evidence to support that is a... Darn, I can't use UFO anymore. Is it, to an extent, part of the UFO, or...
You said you can't use a UFO and you use UFO anyway.
I can't remember what it was now, okay? I'm sorry.
It was
UAP. I can't remember what we discussed.
It was UAP.
UAV.
UAP.
P.
UAP. So you think it was a UAP?
Possibility.
So you think it was the aliens who just detonated?
Always the aliens.
Who just? Oh, actually, I mean ETs. That's the PC way of saying it. According to Demi Lovato. Now, after the event was made public, the United States Department of Defense clarified that it was either a bomb blast or a combination of natural phenomena such as lightning, a meteor, or a glint from the sun. Now, the initial... Of course
they would say such a thing.
Really? You think that the Defense Department is wrong?
They're always up to something. They always want to hide.
Where are they hiding?
We don't know. That's why we keep getting on their butt about hiding things, because they won't tell us what they're hiding.
Okay, well, maybe we'll find out. So the initial assessment by the United States National Security Council, with technical support by the Naval Research Laboratory, in October 1979, was that the American intelligence community had high confidence that the event was a low-yield nuclear explosion, although no radioactive debris had been detected, and there were no corroborating seismic or hydroacoustic data. A later NSC report revised this position to inconclusive about whether a nuclear test had occurred. In that same report, concluded that if a nuclear test had been carried out responsibly, should be ascribed to the Republic of South Africa. So that's what that report has to say. That's what the NSC thinks. They believe that if it's anybody, it would have to be South Africa. Do you think it's South Africa?
No.
No? Well, I have their flag right here. So
yeah.
I only do that because it takes place there. So let's see what the Office of Science and Technology has to say.
Of course, science.
So the Carter administration asked the Office of Science and Technology Policy to convene a panel of instrumentation experts to re-examine the Vela Hotel 6911 data and to not attempt to determine whether the optical flash detected came from a nuclear test. The outcome was politically important to Carter, as his presidency and the 1980 re-election campaign prominently featured the themes of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. Now, the SALT II treaty had been signed 3 months earlier and was pending ratification by the United States Senate. And Israel and Egypt had signed the Camp David's Accords 6 months earlier. Now, an independent panel of scientific and engineering experts was commissioned by Frank Press, who was the science advisor to President Carter and the chairman of the OSTP, to evaluate the evidence and determine the likelihood that the event was a nuclear detonation. The chairman of this science panel itself was Dr. Jack Ruina of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and also a former director of the U.S. Department of Defense's Advanced Research Projects Agency. Now, reporting in the summer of 1980, the panel noted that there were some key differences in the detected optical signature from that of an actual nuclear explosion, particularly in the ratio of intensities measured by the two detectors on the satellite. The now declassified report contains elements of the measurements made by the Vela Hotel satellite. So there's that. Now, the explosion was picked up by a pair of sensors on only one of the several Vela satellites. Other similar satellites were looking at different parts of the Earth, or weather conditions precluded them from seeing the same event. Now, the Vela satellites had previously detected 41 atmospheric tests by countries such as France and the People's Republic of China, each of which was subsequently confirmed by other means, including testing for radioactive fallout. Now, the absence of any such corroboration of a nuclear origin or the Vela incident also suggested that the double flash signal was a spurious zoo signal of unknown origin, possibly caused by the impact of a micrometeoroid. Now, such zoo signals, which mimic nuclear explosions, had been received several times earlier. So what do you think? Do you think it was a zoo signal?
No.
No, you don't think it's a zoo signal? What do you think it is so far?
I'm still leaving my opinion out there.
OMG.
I know. It's the first.
So, yeah, let me show you the actual charts on that day in 1979. All right, so there it is. Those are the signal readings.
Interesting.
So what do you make of that?
They're wavy lines.
Wavy lines? We can see that there's two readings right here. One there and one there. And another two right here. So these are the two nuclear explosions in questions. Now, we don't know what caused them, but we're about to get to the bottom of it. The report noted that the flash data contained many of the features of signals previously observed nuclear explosions, but that careful examination reveals a significant detonation in the light signature of the September 22nd event that throws doubt on the interpretation as a nuclear event. Now, the best analysis that they could offer of the data suggested that if the sensors were properly collaborated, any sorts of the light flashes were spurious zoo events. Thus, their final determination was that they could not rule out that this signal was of nuclear origin. Now, based on our experience in related scientific assessments, it is our collective judgment that the September 22nd signal was probably not from a nuclear explosion. That was a quote from Runa. The Runa ad hoc panel report. Now, the Runa panel did not previously consider a detailed study done by the Naval Research Laboratory, concluding that the strong signals detected by 3 Ascension Island signal was detected by 3 Ascension Island Mills hydrophones, which supported a near surface nuclear blast that could be associated with the observed double flash. The study used French testing in the Pacific as models and placed the site in the vicinity of the Prince Edward Islands. Now, we're going to go into Victor Glinsky, the former member of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Now, he argued that the science panel's findings were politically motivated.
Of course.
Do you think it was politically motivated?
Isn't it everything politically motivated?
I guess. Now, some data seem to confirm that a nuclear explosion was a source for the double flash signal. An anomalous traveling ionospheric disturbance was measured in the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico at the same time. But many thousands of miles away, in a different hemisphere of the Earth, a test in Western Australia conducted a few months later found some increased nuclear radiation levels. Now, a detailed study...
Oh my.
So, a detailed study done by New Zealand's National Radiation Laboratory found no evidence of excess radioactivity and neither did the U.S. government-funded nuclear laboratory. Now, Los Alamos National Laboratory scientists who worked in the Vela Hotel program have professed their conviction that the Vela Hotel satellite's detectors worked properly. So what do you think?
I mean, if it's working properly and it's not a nuclear explosion, how do you make out what's happening?
So you don't think it's a nuclear explosion?
No.
Oh, what do you think it is?
Aliens, as per chance.
You think it's the aliens?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Let's see what else. So Leonard Weiss, at the time staff director of the Satellite Subcommittee on Energy and Nuclear Proliferation, was also raised concerns on the finding of the ad hoc panel, arguing that it was set up by the Carter administration to counter embarrassing and growing opinion that it was an Israeli nuclear test. Specific intelligence about the Israeli nuclear program was not shared with the panel, whose report therefore produced the plausible deniability that the administration sought. OMG. So, we're gonna go into the various countries that this could have been. So, right now, which country do you think did this? If it was a country.
If it was a country?
Yeah, because I know you think it was the aliens. But what do you think, which country?
If I have to guess the country, the U.S.
You think it was America? Why America? What are they doing in South Africa?
We like to stick our nose into other people's business without asking. And then when we get caught, we try to blame it on someone else.
But we're the ones who caught the American satellite was the one who caught the explosion.
Yes. And if you play enough Among Us out there, you know that sometimes the person that always catches the dead body, half the time is the one that caused said dead body.
Okay. I guess so. But let's look into the various suspects that could have caused this explosion. Now, if a nuclear explosion did occur, though, it occurred within the 3,000-mile wide circle covering parts of the Indian Ocean, the South Atlantic, and the southern tip of Africa, and a small part of Antarctica. Now, well before the Vela incident, American intelligence agencies had made the assessment that Israel probably possessed its own nuclear weapons. Now, according to journalist Seymour Hersh, the detection was the third joint Israeli-South African nuclear test in the Indian Ocean, and the Israelis had sent 2 IDF ships and a contingent of Israeli military men and nuclear experts for the test. Now, author Richard Rhodes also concludes the incident was an Israeli nuclear test conducted in cooperation with South Africa, and that the United States administration deliberately obscured this fact in order to avoid complicating relations with South Africa and Israel. Likewise, Leonard Weiss offers a number of arguments to support the test being Israeli and claims that successive U.S. administrations continue to cover up the test to divert unwanted attention that may portray its foreign policy in a bad light. Similarly, Professor Avner Cohen concluded that in hindsight, the existence of a cover-up by the United States is unambiguous because there were at least 3 independent scientific pieces of evidence unrelated to a satellite that confirmed the existence of the explosion. So, what do you think about that? Do you think it was Israel and America just covered it up?
Again, we like to put our noses into anyone's business. And if you pay us enough money, you need us to help cover it up? It wasn't nuclear explosions at all. Wink, wink.
I do like money. Now, in the 2008 book, The Nuclear Express, Thomas C. Reed and Danny B. Stillman stated their opinion that the double flash was the result of a joint South African-Israeli nuclear bomb test. David Albright stated in his article that the double flash event in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists that if the 1979 flash was caused by a test, most experts agree it was probably an Israeli test. In 2010, it was reported that on February 27, 1980, President Jimmy Carter wrote in his diary, "We have a growing belief among our scientists that the Israelis did indeed conduct a nuclear test explosion in the ocean near the southern end of Africa." So, that's pretty big. So, Leonard Weiss of the Center of International Security and Cooperation at Stanford writes, "The weight of the evidence that the Vela event was an Israeli nuclear test assisted by South Africa appears overwhelming." Now, Reed has written that he believes the Vela incident was an Israeli neutron bomb test. Now, the test would have gone undetected as the Israelites specifically chose a window of opportunity when, according to the published data, no active Vela satellites were observing the area. Although the decade-old Vela satellite that detected the blast was officially listed as retired by the U.S. government, it was still able to receive data. Additionally, the Israelis chose to set off the test during a typhoon. Now, by 1984, according to Mordecai Vanunu, Israel was mass-producing neutron bombs. So,
oh my.
It looks like a pretty open and shut case. It sounds a lot like Israel did it.
Sounds like it.
Sounds you're
but
still
are
not.
We for real about it?
You're still not convinced?
Nah.
Okay. Well, let's look at the other side of that coin. The Republic of South Africa. Now, they did have nuclear weapons program at the time, and it falls within that geographic region. Nevertheless, it is ascended to the Partial Test Ban Treaty in 1963. And concurrent with the end of apartheid, South Africa has disclosed most of its information on its nuclear weapons program. According to international inspections and ensuing International Atomic Energy Agency report, South Africa could not have constructed a nuclear bomb until November 1979, 2 months after the double flash incident. Therefore, the IAEA reported that all possible South African nuclear bombs had been accounted for. A Central Intelligence Agency report dated January 21st, 1980, that was produced for the United States Armed Control and Disarmament Agency concluded that. Now, this is a line from the report. So, in sum, State INR finds the arguments of South Africa conducted a nuclear test on September 22nd inconclusive. Even though if a nuclear explosion occurred on that date, South Africa is the most likely candidate for responsibility. Now, the United Nations Security Council Resolution 418 of November 4th, 1977, introduced a mandatory arms embargo against South Africa, which also required all states to refrain from any cooperation with South Africa in the manufacture and development of nuclear weapons. Now, Sasha Polakau-Saransky writes that in 1979, South Africa was not yet advanced enough to test nuclear device by the first week of October. The State Department had realized that South Africa was probably not the guilty party and Israel was the most likely candidate. So what do you think? South Africa or Israel?
If I have to pick between those two, Israel.
Yeah, it is looking more like Israel, because it looks like South Africa didn't have the means to do something like that. But don't worry, there are other ones. There are other suspects.
Of course there's other suspects.
Yeah. Like in 1979, the Defense Intelligence Agency reported that the test might have been a Soviet test, done in the violation of the 1963 Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. 20 years earlier, in 1959, the USSR had conducted a secret underwater test in the Pacific the Pacific in violation of the 1958 bilateral moratorium between the Soviet Union and the U.S. Now, before the 1958 moratorium was unilaterally and officially abrogated by the Soviet Union in 1961. So there's them. Now, India had carried out a nuclear test in 1954, which was codenamed the Smiling Buddha. Now, the possibility that India would test a weapon was considered, since it was possible for the Indian Navy to operate in those waters so far south. This was dismissed as impractical and unnecessary, as India had signed and ratified the Limited Test Ban Treaty in 1963 and had complied with it even in its first test, and that India was not hiding its nuclear weapons capability. So, India, you're good to go. Now, an agency intelligence memorandum requested by the United States National Security Council and entitled the September 22nd, 1979 event analyzed the possibility of Pakistan wanting to prove its nuclear explosive technologies in secret. But that's basically all we have about that. Now, since the double flash, if one existed, could have occurred not very far to the west of the French-owned Kerguelen Islands. Now, it is a possibility that France was testing a small neutron bomb or another tactical nuclear bomb. So, what do you think about that? Who did it?
So many testings going on of things that could possibly be nuclear, but not officially going off. It's just a test. We're just looking to see. But we didn't do it.
You don't think it was America?
I always suspect America.
Okay.
As an American, it's always...
So you think it's none of these and it was America?
If it's not aliens, yes, it's America.
Okay. Not Israel or South Africa?
They're just using them as a cover.
Okay. So, since 1980, some small amounts of new information have emerged, but most questions remain unanswered. Now, a Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory report from 1981 notes, and here's a thing. Tyros N plasma data and related geophysical data measured on September 22nd, 1979 were analyzed to determine whether the electron precipitation event detected by the Tyros N at 12:59 a.m. Universal Time could have been related to the surface nuclear burst. Now, the occurrence of such a burst was inferred from light signals detected by two Vela bagmeters 2 minutes before the Tyros N event. We found the precipitation to be unusually large but not unique. It probably resulted from passage of Tyros N through the precipitating electrons above a pre-existing auroral arc that may have brightened to an unusually high intensity from natural causes 3 minutes before the Vela signals. We conclude that such an event, although rare, is not unique, and furthermore, in this particular event was associated with an auroral arc that probably existed before the Vela incident. Although it may be argued that the segment of the arc sampled by the Tyros N was intensified by an SNB, we find no evidence to support this thesis or to suggest that the observation was anything but the result of a natural magnetospheric process. So, there it is. It was an auroral arc.
So it's not nuclear, it's not a bomb, it's not an alien, it's just something else that's not any of that.
Yeah, it was an auroral arc that may have brightened to an unusually high intensity by natural causes.
Natural causes.
Yep. Now, in October 1984, a national intelligence estimate in the South African nuclear program noted there is still considerable disagreement within the intelligence community as to whether the flash in South in the South Atlantic detected by a U.S. satellite in September 1979 was a nuclear test, and if so, by South Africa. If the latter, the need for South Africa to test a device during the set time frame of this estimate is significantly diminished. Okay. Now, a shorter form of this wording was used in a subsequent National Intelligence Council memorandum in September 1985. So, there's that. Now, let's fast forward to February of 1994. Commodore Dieter Gerhardt, a convicted Soviet spy and the commander of South Africa's Simonstown Naval Base at the time, talked about the incident upon his release from prison. This is what he has to say. Although I was not directly involved in planning or carrying out the operation, I learned unofficially that the flash was produced by an Israeli-South African test, codenamed Operation Phoenix. The explosion was clean and was not supposed to be detected, but they were not as smart as they thought, and the weather changed, so the Americans were able to pick it up. So, there we go with that. We have this Gerhardt guy who says it was the Israelis and South Africans, but keep in mind he was a convicted Soviet spy. So, who knows? Now, Gerhardt further stated that no South African naval vessels had been involved, and that he had no first-hand knowledge of a nuclear test. In 1993, when President F.W. de Klerk admitted that South Africa had indeed possessed 6 assembled nuclear weapons, with the 7th in production, but they had been dismantled before the first all-race elections of April 1994. Now, there was no mention specifically of the Vela Incident or of Israeli cooperation in South Africa's nuclear program. On April 20th, 1997, the Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz quoted the South African Deputy Foreign Minister Aziz Pahad was supposedly confirming that the double flash from over the Indian Ocean was indeed from a South African nuclear test. Now, Haaretz also cited past reports that Israel had purchased 550 tons of uranium from South Africa for its own nuclear plant in Dodoma. In exchange, Israel allegedly supplied South Africa with nuclear weapons design information and nuclear materials to increase the power of nuclear warheads. Pahad's statement was confirmed by the United States Embassy in Pretoria, South Africa, but Pahad's press secretary stated that Pahad had only said that there was a strong rumor that a test had taken place and that it should be investigated. In other words, he was merely repeating rumors that had been circulating for years. Now, David Albright, commenting on the stir created by this press report, stated, "The U.S. government should declassify additional information about the event. A thorough public airing of the existing information could resolve the controversy." Now, in October 1999, a white paper that was published by the U.S. Senate Republican Policy Committee in opposition to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty stated, "There remains uncertainty about whether the South Atlantic flash in September 1979, recorded by the optical sensors in the U.S. Vela satellite, was a nuclear detonation, and if so, to whom it belonged." So that was still going on. They're still wondering about it in 1999. So, what's your opinions on all that?
Well, look at that. First we had it solved and then, bam. Hey, we don't have anything solved. What are you talking about? It's the U.S. doing propaganda.
It's propaganda?
Yep. U.S. always got to stick their nose in someone else's business.
Okay. Well, the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory and the National Intelligence Estimate stated that it was most likely an auroral arc that caused the thing. But then we have Gerhardt the Soviet spy and commander of South Africa, Simonstown, said that it was an Israeli South African test. And we also have South African President de Klerk saying that they had it, but then apparently it was just misconstrued as just a rumor. So there's a bunch of things going on around here. So let's fast forward to 2003. Stansfield Turner, the director of national intelligence, during the Carter administration, stated that the Vela detention was of a man-made phenomenon. In his 2006 book, On the Brink, the retired CIA clandestine service officer Tyler Drumheller wrote in his 1983 to 1988 tour of duty in South Africa. So this is what he has to say. We had operational success, most importantly regarding Pretoria's nuclear capability. My sources collectively provided incontrovertible evidence that the apartheid government had in fact tested a nuclear bomb in the South Atlantic in 1979, and that they had developed a delivery system with assistance from the Israelis. OMG. So what do you think? This is according to Tyler Drumheller, the CIA officer who was the chief of European Division for clandestine operation in the Directorate of Operations. So that's what he has to say. Now in 2010, Jimmy Carter published his White House diary. In the entry for September 22nd, 1979, he wrote, "There was an indication of a nuclear explosion in the region of South Africa. Either South Africa, Israel, using a ship at sea, or nothing." On February 27th, 1980, he wrote, "We have a growing belief among our scientists that the Israelis did conduct a nuclear test explosion in the ocean near the southern end of Africa," which is what you said earlier. Now, some American information related to this incident has been declassified in the form of heavily redacted reports and memoranda following requests for records made under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. On May 5th, 2006, many of these declassified documents were made available through the National Security Archive. A December 2016 report by William Burr and Abner Cohen of George Washington University's National Security Archive and Nuclear Proliferation International History Project noted that the debate over the South Atlantic flash has shifted over the last few years on the side of man-made weapons test. Now, the National Security Archive briefing concluded, a Central Intelligence Agency-sponsored panel of well-restricted scientists concluded that a mysterious flash detected by a U.S. Vela satellite over the South Atlantic on the night of September 22nd, 1979, was likely a nuclear test. Ah! So, what do you think about that? I mean, people are flip-flopping all over the place.
Of course.
So, do you think...
Someone's got to save their own butt sometimes.
Yeah, so are you more convinced that this was a nuclear explosion or a natural event?
A nuclear explosion.
You think it was a nuclear explosion? You don't sound that confident.
Well, no telling with Americans.
Okay. So, the newly released research and subsequent report was largely based upon recently declassified event documents in files at the National Archives of Jared C. Smith, a former ambassador and special envoy on nuclear non-proliferation during Jimmy Carter's presidency. Smith had once said, "I was never able to break free from the thought that the event was a joint operation between Israel and South Africa." Now, the document cited on June 1980 U.S. State Department report where DIA Vice Director Jack Verona had said the ensuing U.S. investigation was a whitewash due to political considerations based on flimsy evidence. Now, he added that the weight of evidence pointed towards a nuclear event, and cited hydroacoustic data analyzed by the Naval Research Laboratory. The data he suggested involved signals unique to nuclear spots in a marine environment and emanating from the area of shallow waters between Prince Edward and Marion Islands and southeast of South Africa. Now, Abner Cohen stated that now, 40 years later, there is a scientific and historical census that it was a nuclear test and that it had to be Israeli. In 2018, a new study made the case for the double flash being a nuclear test. And that is basically the end of the story of the Vela incident. So, what is your conclusion?
I feel like there's a lot of redacting going on a lot of those things.
Really? How so? Like, how's it redacting?
I mean, all the pointing fingers here and there, and then, oh no, now that it's been so long, we can tell you it was a test that came out.
Yeah, and Carter published his diary with that in it.
Yeah.
So final thoughts. Who do you think did the Vela incident?
Americans.
You still think it's the Americans? I'm thinking it was the South Africans and Israelis, because that's what it most likely is. That's what I'm guessing. But you can say Americans. It's better than your other guess, which was aliens.
When it comes to people, they usually do the worst thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And that means lie.
And that means what?
Lying.
Oh, yeah.
About what's happening.
That happens a lot. We don't get the truth until way later.
Of course.
So yeah, that was the story of the Vela incident. What do you think about it? Was it interesting? Was it an interesting story?
That was an okay, interesting story.
An okay, interesting story?
I mean, pointing fingers can only get you so well.
Okay. So, yeah. So you still think it's 100% it was America, and then we're trying to cover it up?
Of course.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, that was the Vela incident. I've been Nathaniel Avila.
And I'm Hanyu.
Right, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to a Vision podcast, home of Wacky Talkies, The Kingdom, Evil Exists, and many more.